Welcome to Leadership Trademark, the podcast where we explore what it truly means to lead in today's uncertain world. Built on decades of experience across industries, we go beyond theory to examine the real tools, challenges, and outcomes that define leadership today. In Season 1, we laid the foundation, bringing together voices from across sectors to uncover the core principles of effective leadership. Now in Season 2, we turn our attention to the existential challenges organizations face: uncertainty, rapid technology changes, and shifting generational expectations. We kick off the season with founding members Leslie Riley and Rosalind Kingsmill, sharing over 80 years of senior leadership experience, and myself, Sylvia Fraser, a leader driving inclusion and innovation in municipal government and public service. Supporting us behind the scenes is Finley Gain, whose tech expertise ensures our conversations reach you smoothly and professionally. So join us as we unpack real-world leadership with insight, purpose, and actionable strategies, helping you define and refine your own leadership trademark.
On today's episode, we are joined by Al MacVicar, a dedicated physiotherapist with 3 decades of experience across home care, private practice, acute care, and most recently, critical care. Al's leadership journey began long before this chapter of his career. After graduating from Queen's University with degrees in political science and physiotherapy, he went on to coach the Queen's men's varsity soccer team for nearly a decade, shaping young athletes through resilience, communication, and accountability. That blend of service, coaching, and community shows up in today's conversation as Al takes us inside a challenging leadership moment. He shares what it felt like to navigate conflict, rebuild trust, and guide a diverse group through a period of disruption. It is a story grounded in patience, humility, and the belief that strong teams grow stronger through honest dialogue. Al is also a reader, a writer, an advocate for active living, and a proud family man living in Kingston with his wife, 3 children, and their Bern doodle, Tilly. Let's step into this thoughtful and inspiring conversation. Over to you, Roz.
So, Al, working in the medical world, I know that you are working with loads of people and loads of clients. And so I imagine that you have to deal with some conflict. And as I know you, you handle this as a master. You do it with empathy and kindness, and you achieve it. Between you and me, I know you hate dealing with conflict, but we all have to, and I don't think anybody likes it. So, Al, as you begin this evening, I would like you to tell us a story of a time when, in a leadership role of importance, you found yourself right in the middle of a bunch of muck that was full of conflict. And it was your job to sort it out. So if that's okay with you, Al, go ahead. Tell us the story.
Thanks for the introduction, Roz. And I hope I don't get too deep into the weeds here. So please pull me back if I am providing too much information. But I can probably relate to a real visceral experience I had a few years ago. In addition to my duties as a physiotherapist at a local hospital, I also belong to a community group that encourages and helps you develop public speaking in both in a prepared and unprepared manner. And then you get a sense of how you're doing from feedback from the group. It's a wonderful group. We meet on a weekly basis. And I had the pleasure of being elected president of this community organization in the year, I believe it was in the fall of 2022. And it was a year term. And with every new year and new outlook, hopes were high for the upcoming year. It's the first time I've been in such a position. And I was looking forward to what lay ahead. To be honest, I was a bit nervous about what I might be facing, but I knew that there was a great group of people around me. And so I was looking forward to leading from that perspective.
Well, to that point,
Yeah.
Alan, before you start, um, doing something in a senior leadership role,
Yes.
if you're not nervous, you're going to bugger it up.
Well,
Okay.
thank you. And I think that the group could pick up on that. And again, tremendous group of people that supported me throughout the year. And you'll hear how things transpired later in that year. But at the beginning of the year, where really everyone was upbeat, we had 3 new members, which is hard to do with our organization, but we were quite pleased, and we were quite pleased with their progress. And with this group, I should elaborate a little bit more. It's a culturally diverse group. We all have common goals for self-improvement, especially in a public speaking realm. And we're all very imaginative and curious and would love to, again, progress at public speaking, especially in front of a supportive group. So to that end, year started off fine. We actually the newer members were quite pleased. They were not only able to assimilate, but they were able to participate in the weekly meetings. And I was quite pleased. I thought that this role was going to actually be a good one for me, and I thought it was going to be a seamless year. As the year progressed, we get to the new year, and then things started to happen. Problems started to arise. You could sense it in the meetings. The meetings weren't as crisp. There was an underlying tension and sometimes outright conflict between some of the members, especially some of the newer members. And at that point, it was getting to a stage for me where I thought, what is happening here? I'm trying to understand if the dynamic is going to be affected considerably. And then I thought, if that's the case, what am I going to do about it? And when am I going to do this? To be specific, one of the members in particular was becoming a major distraction. I don't know how else to put it. But with respect to the goals and the direction and the mission statement of the club, I, along with others, felt that he was trying to undermine that mission and he was trying to pursue his own agenda. And not only was that the case, but also became quite outspoken with his disappointment with the direction of the club. We tried to reel him in the sense of giving him mentorship with some of our senior leaders. Not only did he ignore them, but he pushed them aside and it became a bigger problem each week. And as a result, as you can only imagine, the joy and enthusiasm of this group that we put so much time and effort to putting together was starting to unravel. And so at that point, I wasn't sure what to do. I'll just be honest, but I knew, as I said earlier, that I had amazing people to lean on. I had amazing resources around me. And so I thought the best thing to do would be to reach out to this group on both a formal and informal basis, on a regular basis, to figure out what could be done about this potential problem that was only going to get worse. And without going too deep into the weeds, with these phone calls and emails and texts and meetings, we were able to come up with a plan, which basically involved removing this member because things were getting so disruptive. And of course, it became even more contentious when there was an issue about being reimbursed
Oh,
for this particular member who had already spent almost 3/4 of the year with our club. And so now we're trying to figure out, obviously, in a very democratic way, using our own organization's constitution, how do we terminate a member that's destroying our club? And ultimately, through these meetings, and they weren't always easygoing meetings, they were also contentious as far as trying to figure out a unified way forward and how to deal with this delicate situation. I don't think this has never happened with our club, and I've never heard it happening with other clubs. So it's not as if I could reach out to someone and say, hey, how do we handle this? And so, as I was mentioning, the members were very supportive. We came up with a plan that obviously, me being the head of the organization, the face of the group, had to manage those very difficult face to face interactions, and the phone calls with somebody that was very disgruntled. And I'm happy to say at the end of it all, he was satisfied with the reimbursement that he was given, but it certainly wasn't easy to arrive at that final decision. It really took an inordinate amount of time to deal with this situation. But happy to say, with a month left in my term, it was a much more cohesive group. We were able to hold our elections and transition to the next year. And there were many lessons that we learned that we can perhaps get into in a little bit later. But for me, I have mixed emotions about that year. In a way, it was hard to go through. I never, ever want to go through something like that again, or anyone else for that matter. But also on the flip side of that, I learned a lot both individually and collectively about how if you work together, you work as a team, and you have good people around you, you can come up with a peaceful resolution that will only strengthen your organization, sports team, club for the future. And so I look back on that year, like I said, with mixed emotions, but most of those people that I leaned on are still around. They're still contributing to this organization on a regular basis. And I think that's why we're such a strong club today. And so that's my one of
That's your
my
story.
experiences.
That's a great story. I really
Thank you.
thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
And it brings to mind a framework that we use sometimes called the SCORE model. And I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but it sounds like you probably used it. So it kind of dissects or it can be used to dissect a conflict into simple questions that examine, the symptoms and the causes and the goals and then long-term impact and what kind of resources do you need to reach the goals and address the causes and or achieve a mutually acceptable outcome. So with your permission, I'd like to sort of ask some of those questions to you, and then maybe you can recall some of the steps that you took to pull it together that way. So, how would you describe, like simply, how would you describe the real problem in that situation that you just described?
You could probably tell from the story, maybe even my tone, that there was a lack of harmony. And I think the meetings were no longer effective. People weren't really getting out of what they wanted. They didn't get out of the meetings what they had signed up for. They wanted to improve, and all of a sudden that was being fractured. That relationship that worked so well was being broken.
And while your observation was they weren't getting what they wanted or expected, in the behavior, what did you see a symptom was? Like, did they stop participating? Did they look glum? Did they go along with the nonsense?
Yeah.
What were the symptoms?
Sure. Yeah. I'll elaborate a bit more. There was certainly a lack of engagement, and certainly from some of the other members, the more experienced members. I think it was there was a sense of disillusionment of what was
Uh,
actually happening. With other members, they became a bit argumentative with protocols and in times of participation, especially amongst each other. So that was certainly something that really was creating a very poor dynamic, and especially not only for the people that were there, but also people that were coming to experience the club for the
Yeah,
first time. So you'd have guests coming in this environment, and really to no surprise, a lot of them didn't return
right,
in the second half of the year. Another symptom was poor growth. We didn't really attract many other people. Not only were we losing guests, we didn't gain another member for the
mm,
rest of that year as far as
mm,
I can
yeah,
recall.
yeah,
So we started with 3. We ultimately ended up losing those 3, but it was more or less addition by subtraction. There was also, yeah, the poor growth of the club, which is obviously one of our missions, or any positive organization. You wanna grow and become stronger, and I'm very happy to say we're in a much different spot today.
yeah,
Another thing I would say too is you just felt exhausted. A
yeah,
lot of us had full days already,
yeah,
working full-time, stressful jobs. We had a few younger people, including Finn at the time,
yeah,
students, but they had busy days in class. And you'd already put forth, or families, in addition to that, and you'd already given everything of yourself to the job you had for the day. And then when you come to these meetings, or you go to your team or your organization, you want to be re-energized. You want to leave that meeting on a high. You want to feel like, yeah, that was worth my time. I feel so much better. And that was something that wasn't happening. So I think with the things that I've jotted down and what I can recall, I think those were the symptoms of, it's fair to say there was a malaise. We had a drop in attendance. And to be honest, even though there were some good things that came out of the year, we were struggling in that
Right.
second half.
Okay. Leslie, I'll shut up now and let you go further with Al.
Well, you've given us a good, clear outline of what some of the symptoms were.
Yeah.
Members were becoming argumentative. They felt exhausted. There was a malaise. There was a drop in attendance. Guests, people that were invited guests, decided not to come back. So, what do you believe was causing
Sure.
these symptoms?
Yeah, I think for sure there were a few members, I would say I'd say at least two of the three members came in with false expectations. They came in with certain maybe preconceptions about what the club really was. I think they ultimately, now I'm looking back on it, had their own agendas. And when you see this on a regular basis, it's hard to sit there and not do anything or say anything about it, especially if you're the president. As you're trying to create this sense of harmony and goodwill and compassion and support, all that stuff, you're trying to keep the ship afloat. And so I think that's the one thing, just their views being incongruous with what the mission statement was and the values of our organization. Secondly, and this can be blamed for so many things globally, no pun intended, COVID changed a lot of things. And I've been a member of this club pre-COVID. I joined in 2019. And at that point, we met in person all the time. That was the only way to meet, at least for our organization. I didn't even know what Zoom was. I thought it was a kids show. So when COVID came along, not only did everything come to a halt for a while, but the meetings became strictly online. And then you lost that sense of community and just being face to face with someone. I mean, this format's working great, don't get me wrong, but when you're meeting as a group in the community, you rely on that interaction, looking someone in the eyes, getting their feedback, listening to them, being engaged and present, all those things. And so COVID really changed that. And there are some good things that came out of it with respect to organizational things. And then things that I'm not thrilled with. But I think what ended up happening with our specific club, when it hit, we lost a lot of our senior members. And again, they didn't want to do the Zoom format, much like myself, weren't computer savvy, and just thought, you know what, I've done my time, I'm ready to move on. And a lot of these senior members were very accomplished people, both in the workforce and in our club. And it created a really big void. And even though our club, when I took over, was, I'd say, what, do the math, Al, 3 to 4 years old, we were almost like a new club again, starting fresh with a lot of new faces, including a new president who was finding his way. And I think there was a vulnerability there that allowed this situation to fester a bit. So I think those were some of the causes. There are probably others as I think along, and I don't want to just be finger pointing and say this wasn't a good member. It was all his or her fault.
Right. No,
Right. No,
that's
you
right.
actually you
You
haven't
know
said
what I
that
mean?
at
So,
all.
but
Yeah.
anyway, Bryce, you may prompt me on some other cause, but I think those are
Well,
the
so
main
I
things.
just want to add to that the way that you're presenting it, the chaos, the confusion, the change, the lack of community, is something that is certainly happening now again, in spite of we're back to face in the world, because the existential situations with the economy, with the government, with the United States, and with this damn weather for the last 2 months become a problem that we have no control over. So it makes understanding the symptoms we see kind of obvious because we see the causes. So then, of course, Leslie, take it from there. What the hell do you do now?
Well, it sounds like from some of the things that you have said when you're looking at the symptoms and the causes that one of the issues we should talk about now is people's desired outcomes or goals, because you mentioned that not everybody was in alignment, that you were almost starting with a brand new group, so people were coming in with their own notions. So can you describe some of those the goals or desired outcomes that you observed?
Yes. So I'm going to address this more in a short-term perspective, and I think they were almost they were evident almost immediately once we had some resolution with this issue.
Okay.
And the fact that contrary to what was happening earlier, we had a rejuvenation. There was I don't want to sound melodramatic and say there was a rebirth, but there's certainly a sense of positivity going forward, heading up to our elections, our end of year elections. And I think that the fact that we still had a club is
Mhm.
probably the best outcome that one could hope for going through what we did.
Especially if you're the president.
Especially if you're the president, how would that look in my bio?
Yeah.
That I was the president the last year the club existed might raise some questions. But for me, I think the fact that we were able to manage through that very difficult time, and we were able to learn a lot of lessons that we applied not only to the next year, but the subsequent year that are still in place today that have made a world of difference
Mhm.
with respect to our group dynamic. But I think the fact that just the change in our outlook, the fact that there was that positivity, and the fact that we got through a really difficult situation
Mm,
made us stronger.
right.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Thank
Mhm.
you.
So, just say a bit more about that
Sure.
because I think when conflict is brewing, it kind of bubbles up
Sure does.
and it's not often verbally expressed or shared.
Right.
So there's a period of time where you kind of have to wait it till it matures into something, right?
Definitely.
Um, what what you just said was that by sticking with it, your approach to it was instead of just hitting it right with the problem, you work towards a different kind of outlook that was positive, that was engaging, that encouraged it. Am I understanding that?
Correct.
Okay. And then God knows how you did it. I wouldn't have been able to. Leslie would attest to that. But somehow, Al, as the leader, you were fully accountable
Mhm.
and you had the patience to let this plant get replanted and flourish again.
Yes.
And you had the respect for the team to know this one and that one and whoever, once they had your support, would pick up their end of the stick. And then we're back to the patience,
Yeah.
because I think, in my experience, that the issues that make conflict next to impossible is a lack of patience. That somehow you've really got to let the water in the basement fill up 5, 6 inches before you agree to go and buy a sump pump. There's a certain way with a group where you almost have to let them get to the point that they're fed up with it, not just complaining about it. Okay. Leslie, back to you.
So, at the risk of going too deeply into the woods, I'm fascinated by how people come into this group. Presumably, there were some stated goals or group to begin with. And what was the nature of these disparate goals or desired outcomes? And how did you go about figuring out what that was all about? Like, can you give me an example without exposing or
Yep.
humiliating anyone? I don't
Of
want
of
you to.
Of course. Yeah, of course, it's a great question. And with our organization, our group, team, club, however you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, is that we try and have a structure in place that, first of all, it works on your self confidence and personal growth. It's all about self development and being able to get up in front of a room of strangers, if that need be, and speak in a clear, coherent manner with minimal nerves. And there are certain, should I say, journeys that people can take throughout this for each membership year. And they can pursue various types of specialties with respect to what they want to, what they'd like to learn about and how they'd like to develop these particular skills and convey them in a cogent manner, as I said, in front of a group of people. And so there is structure to what we do. Problem arises when people ignore the structure
Okay.
and then want to pretty much promote their own agenda, arrive at these meetings and participate in the way that they see fit with respect to their own outcomes or sorry, their own goals.
Okay.
It's so it's somebody that is really not respecting, for lack of a better word, the rules of our organization, and it's creating conflict and tension and stress and anxiety amongst all the members because 90% of the members are doing that, as they should be.
Right.
And so I think that became one of the big problems, and then not respecting advice, sage wisdom. I don't wanna
Right.
say from the elderly, but from experienced members that have been there, done that, seen it all, and then just to just to be put aside. So I think that was really
Okay.
that was one of the big problems. I don't know if that answered your question, but it was I don't know if there's a second part to that question. I might have gotten
No,
lost.
that does it does
Okay,
answer my question.
okay.
It's basically, if I were going to reword it, say that there were people who came into that either not knowing, not understanding, or not caring what everybody else wanted to get out of this because they had their own
Yeah,
horn to toot, and that's how they were going to pursue it.
yes,
Now, you mentioned that you had wonderful resources within the majority of the group that was there that had experience and knowledge and that were pretty much on side with your stated goals and desired outcomes. And you were able to utilize these resources to help you come to a reconciliation of the
yes,
problem. Can you describe how you got people to help you with that goal? Or
yes.
not that with that goal, but as resources, how you got them to help you reach, a good conclusion?
Sure. And again, I can't say enough about the people that helped with that situation. And I think the fact that they had so much respect for the organization and the mission and the club in general that they wanted to see it through. And throughout the year, there were people that on that in that group that I got to know even better. And there was an element of trust amongst members that really helped us deal with some of the negative consequences that we were witnessing. And I'll be honest that we weren't always on the same page. There was probably about 5 or 6 that were part of this group that helped me through it, and that's okay. We also developed a spirited discussion that sometimes ultimately I had to make the final call, but only after I had the input. And as I mentioned earlier, there was a lot of these informal and formal meetings happening for about 6 to 8 weeks or so toward the latter part of the year. And I think when you meet on a weekly basis and you're obviously friends with this group and you respect and trust them, admire them for their own character that you see on display every week and their mentorship in general, you couldn't ask for a better group. And so I would have to say that I'd be remiss if I didn't include this part, is that if you talk about official resources, we are looking at, an organization's constitution, an organization's handbook, section 3A,
Yeah.
subset B,
Page 96.
exactly. And to me, I understand why it's there. But for me, there was such a human element in this. It was a real visceral reaction and response that we needed to make and to be intuitive. To be honest, with all due respect to the SCORE method, there wasn't any document that I would be holding up and say, how this is point A, this is point B. With all due respect, I would
Right.
say, Jim, what's your thought on this? Can you please advise me? You have 2 minutes. Julie, what can you tell me? What is your point?
Mm.
You disagree with Jim. Okay, I will hear you out. So those types of things happened quite a bit, and as well as electronic communication. And I think we did right. I have no regrets. There's nothing that I or we would have done differently looking back on it. I think we tried to do the right thing. And you mentioned patience earlier, Ross. I
Mhm.
appreciate that. And don't give me too much credit. Patience is something that we've all had to acquire. In my case, having special needs in my family
Yeah.
has helped me develop that.
Right.
Mm.
I can assure you 100% that if I wasn't in this situation, wonderful family, but if I didn't have those life experiences, I wouldn't have the same element of patience that I had for that year. And also with my work, you were also very kind, Roz, mentioning my work as a physiotherapist and dealing with difficult situations and conflict there
Of
and
course,
seeing
right.
really sad situations. That
Mm.
has also helped me be a better leader.
Mm. So if I were to summarize, it sounds to me like you established trust, compassion, stability, and hope with the
Yes.
members of the people that you felt you could trust. You asked for their input, and then you listened, and then you were accountable, and you took accountability to make the final decision and carry it through. And
Yes.
that was how you got to your final result.
Yes.
Oh, and the patience. I forgot the patience.
Yeah. So Al, in the role of being a leader or a parent, I mean, those are the two jobs that you can't get a license to do. There's no book, there's no certificate. It's a happening thing. And inside that, what you've talked about here was a consistent, I'm going to say almost three-pronged approach, that you knew what the organization stood for and what to do, and the program, and do step 1, step 2, step 3. So that was where you were aiming as a leader of the group. But at the same time, you looked at each individual to see who's in, who's out, who's up, who's down, where is the whatever. And I think pejoratively, I would have anyway, on an inside game, you thought, well, I got to do something with this guy or that gal. But outwardly, you held the space and you were patient and continued to engage them. And then in the end, you never gave up with, you never said this, but I'm the president, do what I tell you to. But seriously, leaders that I've worked for and coached and worked with who take that sort of, I got to get it done now and you will do what I tell you, or. And one of the things that, as I'm engaging with this, especially with clients, it takes them a while to unpack how I'm really supposed to help them, right? Like I've got some magic wand or I can see in their brain, but I listen and I can tell when stuff's left out.
Yeah.
And I can tell by the tone of voice that they're not lying directly, but they're not being truthful. I can see that they're not particularly authentic. They're right on the edge of complaining. So that's the point at which I found this to be helpful, especially with conflict. it takes a lot of listening. It's rather boring, but oh well, you got to do it because if they don't get it out, you'll never get it and they'll never get that they get it. And then at that point, I say, okay, I think I get it. So my understanding is you want to do ABC. Is that right? Yes. And it's short. And I said, okay, so I have 3 questions. Have you got time to do this? And of course, there's part of the problem because everything's urgent and it should have been last month and their boss is going to whatever, right? So we go through that. And then let's say they say, yes, I do have the time. I say, okay, have you got the information you need? They never have the information. Why is that? Because they had no patience to observe it and to not lose it with them, right? And then, of course, the final question, which is a great leadership question to ask leaders. So, have you got control? And the ones who said yes, I said, okay, there's your problem, bucko, because you don't have any control. You have influence, but your people, your team, your organization will do the work. So, time, information, and control.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I've gotten into a smacker of something personally, I sit down and I think, okay, have I got time to do this? No, I don't have time. And so then a certain amount of panicky energy comes in, right? Do I have the information? Well, probably not. So then there's a certain part of, oh, well, that's good enough, or we'll go with it, which is always stupid because later on it shows up that, it was the driver's side on the rear wheel that was flat, not the rear wheel on the passenger side. You've changed the wrong tire, to make it simple, right? And then, the panic inside me because I was accountable, because I said I would, because I thought I could, but I was lost. The reality was I didn't have any control. I didn't have any control at all, except my capacity to ask questions, to listen, to respond. It worked pretty well most of the time, except I will share one time when Leslie and I were in a meeting about, there was this guy, I can't remember his name. Anyway, he laid out this thing. There were 8 of us. We were like an advisory council. And I exploded. I stood up and said, I've had enough of this. Yuck, 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 yuck. And I stormed out of the room.
Oh, you forgot to mention you took your hand and you smacked it on the table. Woke everybody right up.
And then I ran for the bathroom, right? So I thought, oh my God, what have I done? I lost it. That was stupid. And so I walked back in and I thought, well, I got to face the music. And as I came in, Leslie said, Roz, thanks so much for bringing up those points. There's a lot of energy in that. Are you feeling better? And I said, well, I'm a little embarrassed. Well, don't worry. Sit down. Now, come on, group. Let's get this figured out. But it often takes, team, 1 punch, 2 punch. It's very difficult to manage conflict when you're the only one who sees it, wants to fix it.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that you're really pointing out the importance of with managing conflict is that there has to be some honesty
Yeah.
about what is really going on. And I think we run into the trap of feeling like we have to cover it over or smooth it out, and all that does is it buries it until it burbles up again and over again. So that honesty about what is really the underlying problem, or the honesty just about saying, I've had enough. I can't take this. I don't want to do this anymore. It creates it shifts the perspective. And now you can really start to deal with what's underneath all of this stuff.
Right.
Right.
I think if somebody respects you, they can handle the honesty. I think if someone, they may not like it, it may hurt a bit, but they know it's coming from a good place. And I
Right.
think when they look at it afterwards, they think, yes, he or
Right.
she, they were trying to do the right thing for me. Now I get it. That's not
Right.
such a raw emotion at that point.
Right.
Exactly. And we can do difficult things with kindness, with respect in mind for with the other person. And I know that's really important to you, Al, that you treat people with respect. I have one
Sure.
more question for
Yes.
you. For somebody who is maybe a new leader or somebody who is just starting to understand that there's conflict on their team, what would you recommend to be like the first step, the thing that they could wake up tomorrow and they could say, I'm going to take this first step to understanding what's underneath this conflict?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have open communication and collaboration amongst your members. I think that the more standoffish you are, that would be more of a recipe for disaster. And I think that problem would continue to fester. I think that if you could generate dialogue, whether that's in a group setting, you could do some team building sessions, organize fun little activities where strategically organize certain groups of 2 or 3 together to achieve a common goal. We had a work session about 2 weeks ago where we built Lego, and we were all assigned to groups of 4. One was a supplier, one was a builder, one was quality assurance, and we all had these various roles. And we were supposed to complete this Lego, which I struggle with, by the way. But anyway, it was a group effort, and we had a time limit, and it was actually quite fun. And so, but there are all sorts of little ideas that you can do that can break the tension, can open the doors of communication. But I think, as you both have alluded to, being honest and authentic, genuine, all those words ring true here as far as trying to understand what the problem is by tr- by whether that's individual or group meetings, and be open and don't be afraid of criticism.
So,
Sometimes
Al,
it's hard to hear, but you need to hear it, and it makes you think, and then you can address it accordingly.
Hmm.
so as we wrap this up, do you think that one of the root causes that does create conflict or keep it going or keep it under the covers is a lack of honest, open, authentic communication?
Certainly. People, the master understatement of the year, don't like to be lied to and taken advantage of, and I think it only has to happen once for you to lose that sense of trust. So I think it's incumbent, if you're a leader, not to break that trust and always try and do the right thing. You'll make mistakes, but own your mistakes, be accountable for them, and then address them and be a better leader based on that experience. But I think that you're so right, Roz. You just have to be open to all of those things. And what I could add just one thing.
Yes.
Earlier, I had mentioned that I had mixed emotions about my year as president for this group. But I can honestly look back with pride on a couple things. A, we talked about all the things that we were able to get through, but B, also it set us up for success in future years. We've had 2 wonderful years in the club since I stepped down as president, and there's many more ahead. And I think that it's such a positive, vibrant group. We're attracting new guests all the time, and we're at an all-time high of membership, but I don't think we would be where we are if we hadn't gone through the hardship a few years ago. So
Yeah.
I think that's one of the long-term results of it, and also to be able to pay it forward as a mentor. By the way, this was my experience in this position. How can I help you? What questions you have? I'm happy to meet with you. And by the way, don't worry about that because it will get better. So those types of things. And so that's really it was a really good year for me in a lot of ways. But of course, I brought up the other things that
Right.
we addressed.
Right.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and like you have said, without that identified conflict within your group, you wouldn't have been able to so clearly and quickly recognize what was bubbling under the
Right.
surface and start a new have a new beginning really
Yeah.
and a new period of growth. So that's a good news story. And thank you very much.
Al, just to underline your character, years ago, like 20 years ago, when I was building big leadership programs to deliver to the city of Toronto to hundreds of people over time. And leadership in government is very tricky. Okay. So I I didn't quite know how to go at this. So I did a lot of research. And one of the things I learned was that the greatest strength that a leader can demonstrate to be a success is kindness. And then I just took off with that. Because if I'm kind, I'm going to listen. If I'm kind, I'm going to ask questions. If I'm kind, I'm going to say, how can I help? If I'm kind, I'm going to be clear about my expectations. If I'm kind, I'm going to back somebody up who gets in a corner. And that kind of thing, well, it kept me from having a nervous breakdown because I couldn't control I couldn't control it anyway.
Thank you so much for having me on. To be honest, this is the first time I've really talked about this experience.
Sounds like you've been talking about it for,
Yeah,
you
I've
did a great job of
well,
helping us understand what it was like and what it meant to you.
thank you. And there were some parts that were really hard to share, but it is nice to get that out. And I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to listening to the other podcasts for sure, the other episodes, and want to thank you for having me on.
Our pleasure entirely. And that would
It's
be a
fun.
wrap.
That's a wrap.
Okay, thank you so much, guys, and all the best to you. And look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you for joining us on the Leadership Trademark Podcast. Today's conversation reminded us that conflict is not a sign of failure, but a signal for honest communication, patience, and courage. We heard how trust, compassion, clear expectations, and the willingness to face discomfort can transform even the toughest situations into opportunities for growth. For leaders listening, your call to action is simple. Lean into transparency, listen with intention, and create space for your teams to be real with you and with each other. That is the foundation of leadership that lasts. Until next time, keep leading with character and your own leadership trademark.